soon. But I'm bringing in a fresh raft of political masterminds to clash on this alongside our former London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey tonight. They are Boris's former advisor, Colville Ranger, the political commentator Suzanne Evans, Conservative Albie Amankona, and Conservative peer and advisor to Boris when he was Mayor of London, Lord Moylan. Great to have you all here. So, Lord Daniel Moylan, let me start with you. You remain loyal to Boris until the end.
Yeah, well, I'm still loyal to Boris as a friend. And was he a great Prime Minister? He was one of the most transformative Prime Ministers in my lifetime, on a par with Thatcher. He changed the country more than as much as Thatcher did, and certainly the most transformative of the 21st century so far.
Sean Bailey?
I think we just need to apply some science to this. He was given a poison chalice in Brexit and he delivered it. The Ukraine have been attacked by Russia and he's defended them. We have a cost of living crisis. He has a plan. And when we went through lockdown and we were all on our faces, some 9 million employees he took on overnight. The results speak for themselves. People who don't think this is because, of course, they've concentrated on what the biased media have focused their minds on. But look at your wallet, look at your children's future and ask yourself the same question.
Albie Amankona?
I think overall we have to remember the context of how Boris came to power in 2018. The business of government couldn't be done. Brexit was up in the air. Theresa May couldn't get anything through. And we almost lost to the Labour Party in a general election against Jeremy Corbyn. But we also can't forget what's happened over the past year. He's made some very silly mistakes. He's made some decisions which really should not have been made. And I think if we look at both of those things together, I don't think he'll be seen as the worst Prime Minister, but he certainly won't be seen as the best Prime Minister.
Suzanne Evans, you actually say Boris will be seen as one of the most unsuccessful Prime Ministers of all time. Why?
I'm afraid I do. And I say that as somebody who very much supported him to become Prime Minister, voted for him to become Prime Minister, and was actually very encouraged by his early days when he did deliver Brexit. There's no doubt about that. But unfortunately, then everything seemed to fall apart. Yes, we had COVID. His response to that, I think, was completely inadequate. The best that can be said for Boris Johnson was he didn't take such a hardline authoritarian line on that as the Labour Party did. But he hasn't made the most of Brexit. Talking about have we got more money in our pockets? Well, I certainly haven't. We've got the highest tax burden in 60 years. That's not a Conservative approach to life. And I think ultimately Boris turned out to be more libertarian than Conservative and therefore didn't really get the job done that he was put into power to do with that stonking majority.
Colville Ranger, as one of his former advisors, how do you respond to that from Suzanne?
I think Suzanne's not looking at the broader picture here. And I think what we need to do is make sure, as you say, Dan, that the MSN don't write the history on Boris's conservatism. This man has redefined British politics at a time when it needed to change. Other parts of the world have struggled with what's going on, the challenges they're facing. Yes, Brexit was a problem for this country, but he redefined it by reaching out to voters that weren't Conservatives. You do not get people who for generations would not go near a Tory box on the voting slip and get them to vote Tory if you don't change the narrative. He has changed British politics. He also did that in government. He had a unique position to drive that through. I saw it firsthand with Daniel, what he did in London. And I saw a politician who could walk the streets of London, people would stop and clap and cheer because they saw a man who connected with them. Yes, he's a unique politician, and that's what scared people as well. And I think that's the thing that we have to really be thankful for, that he managed to defy those people who tried to stop him. And that's what he wanted all of us to do when we worked with him, was defy the naysayers and bring change and bring positivity and do the right thing for the future of this country.
Lord Moylan, I mean, it's interesting. Oh, sorry, you come back, Suzanne.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't disagree with any of that. There's no doubt that Boris Johnson is a brilliant campaigner and taking those red wall seats, absolutely incredible. But then he blew it. He didn't have a poison chalice. He had a golden chalice. He had everything. Who can only dream of having an 80-seat majority? And then, unfortunately, he threw it away. I think it's a great shame.
He hasn't thrown it. This is not about policy. This is about personality. He's been hounded out by personality. Name the policies that he's failed on. I'd like to see the list of policies. And he's got the delivery. Those policemen, those hospitals that are going to be delivered, those election manifesto commitments will still be met by this Conservative government if it gets the right leader and takes that through. That will also be his legacy.
But he's broken several manifesto commitments.
Waiting list. Longest NHS waiting list ever. Like I said, highest tax burden in 60 years. Absolutely nothing's been done to stop illegal migrants coming across the Channel. He got Brexit done. That's it.
Yeah, but in all of
There
those...
were obviously massive external factors, weren't there? I mean, no one could have predicted the pandemic. No one could have predicted the European war. The issue that I have is that the establishment, the mainstream media, the blob, since December last year, they have been out to get him.
Well, they've been out to get him longer than that. I mean, you're absolutely right, of course. There were external factors. And, you know, people will argue for years whether the government as a whole responded in the right way to the pandemic. People generally agree that the government's response under Boris to the Ukraine war has been really very, very good.
Yeah.
And so...
Well, he's saved the world, hasn't he?
Even some Labour people are willing to say that. So, you know, people will argue about what he achieved. Everyone has flaws. And I think Boris does have some flaws. And one of them is he's actually a kind man who wants to get on with people. And he had a cabinet that contained people from all wings of the party. And he ended up being trapped. And a lot of Suzanne's criticisms are actually criticisms of Rishi Sunak. And Boris, you know, should he have sacked Rishi Sunak?
Oh, absolutely, he should have. And Sean Bailey, is that
taxes are something Boris has been trying to get down, and there's been huge resistance from the Treasury and no pushback against Treasury officials from Rishi Sunak. I'm not arguing with Suzanne because she has a point, but we need to understand where the weaknesses were. As far as the campaign against him, I always knew that they would never, ever forgive him and try to get him out. And indeed, you know, I tried to say that to him. But he sort of believed you could build people back together. That's the sort of person he is, that you could bring people back together again. And I think that was, frankly, that was his undoing.
Almost too optimistic.
Too optimistic and too open to people. You know, people have talked about Greek tragedy on some of these programmes today because Boris, you know, he's a classicist and all of that. I think the real pattern here is more like Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar started a revolution, took control of Rome, and then he tried to make friendly, you know, peace and friendship with all his enemies, and they'd all get used to it. And it took them a year or so, and they put the knife in the back and got rid of him.
Sean Bailey, was there a lack of killer instinct there? You know, when he should have sacked Sunak, he didn't.
I think the lack of killer instinct wasn't just in the PM, it was in the parliamentary party in particular. Too many of our MPs now sound like Lib Dems. We've let Labour dominate the conversation so much in Westminster that we're afraid to be Conservatives. You talk to people about we shouldn't be legalising drugs. Oh, no, they get all Lib Dem and Labour on you. We can place much of this blame at the Prime Minister's door, but we must look at what the party has done in a very recent past and what it wants to do next. Suzanne definitely has some points, but I think the level of opposition he received, it was literally a conspiracy.
It was manic.
Yeah,
absolutely manic and vicious.
Had people on the BBC who made it their business to remove the Prime Minister, and they're meant to be
I'm sorry, Sean. I mean, look, we've got to accept that the Prime Minister did make some fundamental mistakes, and they were self-inflicted. His handling of the Paterson scandal was poor. That was self-inflicted. His handling of Partygate was poor. That was self-inflicted. His handling of the Chris Pincher scandal this week was poor.
Yes, but that hardly Watergate, Albie.
That's not a conspiracy.
That's sort of
These
minor HR issues.
They're not minor HR issues.
That should not reach the level of overturning and deposing a democratically elected Prime Minister.
The point is, those things happen, and they're not conspiracy theories. He has to take responsibility for that. He squandered an opportunity of an 80-seat majority with his bad behaviour.
Hold on, Albie, you're right, but let's be clear. Here's where I get my conspiracy theory for. Keir Starmer has had to face absolutely none of the ritual that the Prime Minister have to face, and he's in roughly the same situation.
Or
even
Sturgeon
now,
and Ian
nobody's
Blackford,
asking him
who are in
any
exactly the same
questions.
situation with the sexual abuse scandal right now, and no one is talking about it.
So when I use the word conspiracy, when the Labour Party attack a Conservative PM, that is their job. When the BBC do it, we need to ask questions because they're meant to be... They're not meant to do that.
Suzanne, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I don't disagree with what Sean's saying. There's absolutely no doubt there has been a massive media campaign against Boris Johnson. But let's not forget who actually plunged the knife into his back in the last 48 hours. It wasn't the mainstream media. It was members of his own party. It was 50 of his own ministers and umpteen MPs all queuing up, Brutus style, to stab him in the back. So I don't really think you can blame the media.
But Colvette, isn't that because they had created political paralysis?
Boris Johnson himself used to be a journalist, and he should have a little bit more nous about how this works.
But Colville,
Yeah,
there was
look,
political paralysis
Suzanne,
created by the media.
Suzanne, the drama
Well,
of
I'm
it
sorry,
has been built
if
up over
members
the
of
last. Sorry, if you let
Parliament
me
and
now answer your
ministers are
point,
not strong
the
enough to
drama of
stand
this has
up to a
been the media
bitching
have had a
media, then they're
drip feed
probably not fit for
campaign.
the job.
OK,
are they?
Suzanne, just let Colville respond.
The media have had a constant drip feed campaign on this, which is what's built up the pressure in the minds of parliamentarians, the weak and the fearful in the Conservative Party, and they haven't been able to see past it. If you have continuous drip feeding of this narrative, of these stories, of this personality dragging him through the mud. You know, we had the last real populist prime minister of this country was a man called Tony Blair. He had 1 million people march against him about a war that people felt was unjustified. Was he taken apart around his personality?
No.
There were stories about it, but
No.
it did not happen the way it has happened with this prime minister. And I think we should be fearful of
Because
that.
let's be honest, that I completely agree, and he had friends in the establishment. Look, I just want to get a one-word answer from all of you because it is the question we're putting to our viewers. So finally, Colville Ranger, was Boris Johnson a good prime minister, yes or no?
Yes, in history, he will go down as a good prime minister with flaws, as all of them have had.
Suzanne Evans, was BJ a good PM?
I don't think history will judge him kindly, unfortunately.
Albie Amankona?
With a heavy heart, because of the opportunity squandered, it's going to have to be bad.
Sean Bailey?
I think history will judge him well as long as we don't let MSN write all of that history. I think he was good. Suzanne had some points, so does Abby as well. Mistakes were made, but on the whole, he was a very good PM.
And final word to you, Lord Moylan.
Yeah, I think he's a really transformative turning point in British history, and the test for future prime ministers is going to be whether they follow on and deliver his legacy. Because if they squander it and go back to the situation pre-Brexit and all of that, then the Tory party is toast, and the country is going to slide off into sort of anonymity.
Thank you to my political masterminds tonight. But